Okay, I've got 1 o'clock or close enough to it, so we'll go ahead and get started here. This is the All About Sign-Ins webinar, and we're going to look at sign-ins from a student's perspective, a tutor or staff member's perspective, and signing in as a root or another access group. I'll show you that in the webinar. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about here is the root group. And the root group is typically what you would sign in with if you're an administrator, if you're the one that's setting up things behind the scenes. And that would be the default ones. Now you can change that, of course. And the password is all caps new, but you would change that as well. Okay? Now what I'm talking about is the root group are the people that have access to the back end here of the system. Okay, and I can go look at my root administrator group by clicking on System Access, System Administrator. Okay, and this is the sign-in that I signed in with just now. And as you can see, it's Access Group Root. So that has the most access of any user. Okay, now I can add more people to the root group or other groups that I'll discuss later. Okay, but just to show you that signing in as yourself, you typically would be a root administrator. Okay. The next thing I'm going to talk about is I'm talking about signing into AccuTrack, but I don't necessarily need to have a sign-in station set up for AccuTrack. What I mean by that is I can set up an information-only station, and then students can, and tutors as well, but students can sign in and make appointments, view reports for their visits. Tutors can look at their appointments that are upcoming, enter session notes for students. So they can do a lot of things, but the one thing they can't do is sign into the center. So a good example might be you have a couple of PCs set up in the tutoring center. One of them could be a sign-in station where the students are signing in to get help. The other could be an information-only station that the students would use to create appointments, to schedule appointments. That way the line would keep moving on the one station, and then the other one could be reserved for appointment scheduling. Okay, now how do I do that? Well, I go to System, and in my Setup tab, and I have one checkbox here. It's under, let's see, System Options. And this is what I'm looking for. This station is an information-only station. So I'm just going to check that box and save. Okay, and then I'll return to my sign-in screen. And you see it says current mode is information-only, no sign-ins out from this terminal. So if I tried to enter a student ID, it would tell me the workstation is currently reserved as information only. However, I now have all my buttons down here, such as an appointment, sign up for a seminar, message a staff member, see which tutors are currently in. I can turn these on or off, of course. My student pad and or staff pad. So what I mean is, let's say that this is an appointment station. So I click appointments and enter that ID. And I can create an appointment. So I'm not signing into the center. I'm scheduling next Tuesday at 3 o'clock. I'd like to have an appointment with an available staff member. Okay? And that's all there is to it for an information-only station. Okay, so let's log back in and turn that off. Okay, and that was back in System Setup, System Options. And okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is new student rules. Now, as some of you may know, typically you would put the student information in AccuTrack or AccuSQL via a data import. Now, we have some colleges that don't have the capacity to get those files to import students. So you can allow students to enter themselves into the system. Okay, so the first time they sign in with that ID, it'll realize that that ID is not in the database, and it'll allow the student to enter him or herself into the database. Okay. Now I can go to Users, Setup, and then New Student options right here. And this is how I can define the rules to allow or disallow new students into my database. Now the top box says Allow New Students. Okay, so if I have that checked, then a student can enter him or herself into the database. Okay, Now, it does that, like I say, by knowing that that ID does not exist. So hopefully I'll find one here that doesn't exist. And it's going to allow me to enter my information as a student. You see the ID is the student ID at the top, and then they would put all the information in. Now let's go look a little closer at that information. Okay, now I'm allowing new students, but then I can pre-populate various fields that are entered in the student record. Now the ID mask shows the format of my phone number. I have email that has the back half of our email address here, so you can pre-fill that. You can pre-fill the city, pre-fill a state if you want to. So any of this information can already be populated for that student record so they don't have to enter it. Okay, the other thing I can do for these various items are make them required. So if I want to force them to enter a phone number, I can require that, or force them to enter an email. Okay. Now we have a few other options down here. This one says password protect new student screen. So if you're allowing them to enter themselves, you can put a little extra security on that that would force them to enter a password to get to the new student screen. Okay. Also display a sound. What that would do is an audio alert if a new student is entered in or saves themselves in the database. That's a good thing if you every time a new student enter themselves, you want to go have a lab assistant or somebody help them. Okay. All right, so I'll save that. And one other thing I want to talk about, now I'm going to show you the new student screen again so I can show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's the information that I required. Remember, I required phone number, so that's got the little red dot, required email address. But what I want to talk about are these 10 profile fields. Okay, now profile fields are set up by you. These are the canned ones that we just stick in there for you, but you can change the labels and you can change the values for any of these 10 profile fields. Now, as you can see, I'm presenting those profile fields to the student, but let's say, for example, profile 5 through 10 over here. Now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's say 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 over here. That's going to have information that I want to have for the student, but I don't necessarily want to present for the world to see. Okay, I can turn on or off what profile fields I present to the student. Okay, and how do I do that? Well, I do that through student demographics over here on the left, and then profile setup. Okay, and if you recall the 10 questions, well, I can click through, and I'm seeing those 10 questions as I navigate through them. But what I want you to notice here is, let's look at 6. I have a checkbox that says show or don't show. So if I don't show that, well, I'm still storing the data for the student, but that is not going to be on the main sign-in screen. So I'll do that for 6 through 10. Okay, now let's go back to the sign-in screen. And as you can see, now I have the 5 profile fields. The other ones are not shown. Okay. So if you choose to collect new students in the system, you have options for how that behaves. Now, the other way to do it is through data imports, which I recommend if you can do that. But we can display a message that tells the new students that they need to go talk to somebody to get in the database. Now it says you are not currently registered. You can change that to whatever. Let's say please see Inactive. Okay, I save that. And now I'll try to sign in again. Okay, so there you go. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you is the most simple form of sign-in we can collect in AccuTrack or AccuSQL. And that is merely what time the student signed in and then what time the student signed out. So I'm going to enter a known ID here. And, oh, this student has late media, so he's got to return his college algebra book. And, oh, I also changed something else. I'm sorry, I need to go back and set this, but I'll show you this in a second. But it's just showing Michelle V signed in. Okay, she's done. And she gets a survey. This is other stuff I have in my database. And we'll talk about this in future webinars about collecting information from students and tutors. But now Michelle B is signed out. So I didn't pick a category. I didn't pick an activity. I didn't pick an instructor. I didn't pick a service type. I didn't pick a tutor. I merely signed in and signed out. Now I had some other items attached to that I probably should have turned off first, but that's okay. We can talk about those. Okay, the one was ask student how long they intend to stay. Okay, so let's see if we can find that. Now this is good because I'm kind of struggling for where that is, so let's go find that. Okay, here we go, ask student intended period. So this find is a great way if you don't know exactly where something is. And it'll take you either directly to the screen or a set of screens that would include the option that you're looking for. Okay, so at the very top here it says ask students how long they intend to stay. So I probably should have turned that on the next time through, but that's okay. And what that does is exactly what that screen said. It'll ask you in advance, do you plan to be here 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, or something other? Okay, now the way that operates is we're collecting that period for the student and counting that as their visit. So if they intend to stay 30 minutes, we would credit them with 30 minutes. Okay, if I turn that off, then we're crediting them in real time, for exactly the period they're signed in. Okay, so now we go back to sign in. We'll try another one. And David Arlington signed in. So that's just that simple. Here comes the next student. They sign in. David Arlington is done. He signs out. So I can collect very quickly the sign-ins and sign-outs for the student. Okay, now the other thing I'm going to show you here is a guest sign-in. All right, and let's find out. Now, a guest account is someone that is not in the AccuTrack database, say a visitor coming from somewhere else, but you still want to collect that sign-in information. Now, the guest account is slightly different than the other accounts in that we only track AccuTrack guests that's coming in, okay? So I can run reports, for example, to show a particular student if they're in the database. I can't do that with guests. What I can do is say, show me how many AccuTrack guests have come in for a particular week. Okay? Now I can enable the guest account here, and that just puts a guest sign-in button on the main screen. And again, I can password protect that if I want. Okay, so back to the sign-in screen, and you'll notice now I have a guest sign-in button that wasn't there before. And I've password protected it, so I have to enter that. And now the guest has signed in. Okay, so I know that a guest signed in at 1:14. Okay, let's see where I am here. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to discuss here is we were talking about simple sign-ins, right? And I manually was signing students out, but what happens if a student forgets to sign in? Well, I can very easily set rules for that. And looking at my, let's see, system, set up again, and then sign out option. Okay, so here's my options. Now this is the yellow box that appeared that showed the student signing in, and I can determine how big I want that text to be, how long I want that to display. But what I'm going to talk about here is the use a maximum sign-in period up. Okay. So what this means is if the student is signed in for longer than 6 hours, what do you want to do? Okay, I can either sign them out with X hours. So in this case, I'm giving it 6.01 hours. I can ask them the next time how long they stayed, or I can lock them out completely, and then they have to be unlocked to be able to sign in the next time. Okay, now I use 601 here for a reason, because I can go run reports, and every time I see a student that had a period of 6.01, that's a very simple way for me to know that they forgot to sign out. So then I could maybe send a mailer out to the students and say, hey, please don't forget to sign out to the center. Okay? So that's how you determine the sign out rule, auto sign out rule. Okay, now we're going to increase what we're collecting from the student a little bit more. And that's important because whatever information you collect is the information you can report on. So there's not a lot I can do just getting a sign-in, sign-out time. For example, I couldn't run a visits by activity report because the student didn't pick an activity. They only had a time. I couldn't run an instructor sessions report because the student didn't pick an instructor. So the more information you collect, the more information you can report on. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is have the student pick a category and activity when they sign. Okay? And I can do that very easily here. I'm going to go to my setup, sign in setup, and then activity screen. And you can see I have do not show the activity selection screen during sign-in. Well, let's uncheck that box. So that means show it. Okay? And I can change some of my labels. I can do different things here. We'll talk about some of these in a minute. Let me make sure that I don't want to show a tutor right now. We're going to talk about that shortly. Okay, so now here comes the student signing back in. Okay, and now I have a simple category, and I've called it service. You can call it whatever you like. But the categories, remember, group the particular activities that appear underneath them. So David Arlington, in this case, is coming in because he needs help with, let's say, anatomy and physiology. Okay, he signs in, and David Arlington is signed in. So now I could go run a report and show me all the students that have signed in this week for anatomy and physiology. Well, David Arlington would be on that list. Okay, and he does his thing, he signs out, and it's waiting for the next student. Okay, so that's a simple category and activity selection. Okay. Let's see. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, we're going to continue with this category and activity, but there's a little-known feature here that may be handy for some people, and it's called Signin Only. Okay? Now, what I mean by that is at the activity level, okay, so whatever, these are all the activities that I was able to select from back on that last example, but I can set up rules for a particular activity that says I don't care about students signing out. I only want to know that they signed in. Okay, a good example of that, I had a customer call that they wanted to set up their own database for students that had checked out their caps and gowns for graduation. Well, you're not going to sign in to caps and gowns and then sign out of it, but they created that database. The activity was check out cap and gown, and it was a no sign out. So there's lots of uses for that. Now, how do you do that? Well, I'm going to pick the particular activity, and let's just say oboe, for example. And then there's one box here that says sign in only. Okay, see that right there? So I can say when you sign in and pick oboe, I don't care about you signing out. Okay? Now, how does it record that? Well, it gives them the sign in period and sign out period of exactly the same time. Okay? So we can try that. And oboe. And I signed in at 119, and it auto-signed me out at 119. Okay? Now I could go run reports to see who'd signed into oboe, but I wouldn't want to run reports to view their total sign-in period because I know they don't have one because it's there's no sign-out for that particular activity. Okay, and as you can see, I'm kind of building here. So I started from signing in and signing out, signing in and picking a category and activity. We're going to go to the next step, and that's signing in and picking a category and activity and an available tutor. Okay. Now, tutors or staff members, depending on how you label them, it could be advisors as well, but those are the people that offer services in your center. Okay, so tutors help students when they come in, or staff members help students, or advisors help students. Okay, and they're all going to be in my tutors table here. Now I can again change the terminology, but we'll call them tutors for now. Okay, so let's look here at Cindy Bright. Okay, now before I go there, I want to show you again the categories and activities. These are set up in my database. My categories, the particular activities that appear underneath them. Okay, now let's look at math here for a second. Okay, you can see I have several math classes under my math category. Now, for argument's sake, let's say that Cindy Bright is a math tutor. Okay, now I'm going to go here, and I want to remove all these just to show you how this works. So I'm going to assign my math activities to Cindy Bright. Okay, and I can do that in my add remove assignments. Oops, I keep pressing caps lock. Okay, so I've selected those and I'm just going to move them down. Okay. Now what am I saying here? I'm saying when a student signs into my center and I turn tutor selection on, that if they pick one of these math classes, then Cindy Bright will be one of the tutors that's available to help them. Okay, that's what activity assignments do for tutors. Now let's say I have Tom Cruise here, and I'm going to remove his assignments just to show you a new feature we've got. But now Tom Cruise doesn't help with anything, right? But let's say Tom Cruise is another one of my math tutors. Okay, now in my add remove assignments here, I can duplicate these assignments. So I assign them all to Cindy Bright, but I'm now going to say, well, Tom Cruise, I want you to have those as well. Okay, it'll say it's overriding current, if any. But now let's go look. Tom Cruise, who had nothing, now has all of those math assignments. So you can very quickly assign particular activities to different tutors. Put all your math tutors with their math information, the reading tutors with theirs, or advisors, financial advisors, whatever that may be. But that's how you assign the activities to the tutor. Okay, now there's one more piece of the puzzle here, and you can use this or not use this. And what I'm talking about is tutor schedules. Okay, if a student signs in and picks math at this point, that would be fine. But if I enable tutor schedules, Cindy Bright would only show up if A, she has that math assignment assigned to her, and B, her schedule indicates that she's at work. Okay, and right down here I have something called tutor schedule. Okay, so you can see for Cindy Bright, I'm going to delete her custom schedule because that's kind of confusing, and there'll be future webinars on all this as well. But I've got a regular schedule, and regular just means from now till the end of the semester, Cindy Bright works from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. So that's good because it's 1:30, right? So if a student signs in, picks one of these math courses, it's Cindy Bright should definitely show up because she has that schedule. Okay. Now, how do I said that you can use that or not use that, and what did I mean by that? Well, I'll show you here. Tutor selection. Here we go. Tutor list includes all tutors assigned to an activity regardless of their availability. Okay, if I check that box, then what I'm saying is I don't care about tutor schedules. If they have the activities, show them. Okay? If I don't check this box, then it's going to honor those tutor schedules, and the tutors will only show up if A, they have the activity assignment, and B, they're at work. Okay? Now let's look at tutor selection. I'm not showing it right now, but let's go ahead and show that. So I'm going to click Show Tutor Selection. Okay, let's return back to the sign-in screen. Okay, so here's Ron Harrison, and let's see, I think I gave Cindy Bright math, right? So here comes Ron Harrison coming in for college trig. It asked me the first time if I want to sign into that. And now I have a list of tutors. Well, I have Cindy Bright, but I also have quite a few others, don't I? So that means that Cindy, Sean, Tom, Cameron, and Morgan, A, have that trigonometry assignment assigned to them as a tutor, and B, they're at work. Okay? Their schedule indicates they're at work. Okay, so I can continue my sign-in process, and now Ron Harrison is in. Okay. Now we're going to go a little further. And I'm now going to sign a student in with the category, the activity, the tutor, the instructor, i.e. the professor that teaches the class, and a service type. A service type is just another box I can put on my sign-in. Okay, so we've already got the category, activity, and tutor covered from our last example. But now let's go look at service type and instructor. Okay, again, instructors are professors that teach classes, and they're assigned to activities. Okay, now remember, tutors are assigned activities so they can help students with them, but I assign the instructors or professors to each individual class. Okay, so let's see one here. All right, let's pick bassoon, for example. Okay, now I'm going to edit that record, and you see down here I have instructors select. Now this again is importable. Typically you would import the instructors, and it may be a one-to-one or a one-to-many relationship. And what I mean by that is if you use a particular CRN or unique activity ID, then there may only be one professor for each of your particular classes. If you have a more generic, college algebra without a particular CRN, then there may be multiple different professors that potentially teach that college algebra course, okay, or college algebra in general in that case. But I'm just going to go ahead and pick a few here. Let's say Woody Allen and Stan Adams and Richard Foster are my bassoon professors. Okay, and then I talked about service type. We'll cover that at the same time here, service type. And I've got these service types. Now these, again, you define what they are, and then you decide whether to show them to the students or not. So I've got self-study, required hours. It's totally up to you or what you put in there, or if you use this or not. Okay, but I'm going to go now to sign-in setup. Okay, and my activity screen options. Now here's the options I want to look at. I have instructors now. Well, I'm going to click Show Instructors box. I can make that required or not if I want to. Okay, now this one is important. Ask students whether to report session to instructor. So if indeed you have the student pick an instructor, this was a request from another college, I guess it was FERPA or something or other, where they had to ask the students permission whether or not to report their visit to their professor. So you can turn that on or off. Now, why would that be important? Well, what we can do is automate a report that goes to every instructor that shows the students that signed into the tutoring center, for example. Okay? I should say not all students, but all students that said yes, report to instructor. Now, I do that by creating a schedule, and I'm saying in this point, every Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon between September through the end of December, I want to show them a report that shows for this week how many students signed into my center. Okay? And I cover this quite a bit in another webinar, but just to show you, primarily you can ask or not ask to report that visit. Okay? Now I also want to show my service types, so I'm going to click that as well. So now I've got Show Instructor, Show Service Type. And we're continuing to build, so now it should say what? Category, activity, service type, instructor, and then a tutor selection. Okay? So let's give that a go. Okay, so Charles Norris is coming in for bassoon, and remember those are the 3 instructors I just tied to that bassoon. So he's coming in with Stan Adams. There's my service type box that I've shown. So he's coming in for required hours. And let's say that he wants to sign in with Morgan Freeman. And here's my box saying, do you want to report this visit to your instructor or not? Okay, and now Charles Norris has signed in. Okay, and again, I'm collecting a lot of good information there that I can run lots of reports with all the information I'm getting right now. Okay? Okay, now the next thing I'm going to talk about here is all of the things that I just mentioned, but I'm going to add one more piece, and that's registration. Okay, and as most of you know, registration means students don't see everything, every activity. They only see the activities that they're registered for. So that's important. If you have your course catalog in there, you don't want them to fish through, 300-400 different courses to find the one that they're in. You only want them to see their few registered courses this time. Okay. And again, that's usually handled by an import, but I can go manually look at it or add or take away from it. Okay, so in Sign-In Setup Registration, this shows all of my categories and activities. So let's pick Symphony here, for example. And if I look at bassoon, okay, I've got the following students registered for bassoon. Okay, so Aaron Amundsen is one. And he could be registered for multiple courses, but he just happens to be in bassoon. I can go through my list and see if I can find anything else that people are registered for. So I've got a couple here. Let's see if I've got anything, and maybe in math. I'm not sure who's registered for what. Charles Norris. But let's register Aaron here for this as well. And again, he may be registered for more. Now, how do I know what Aaron is registered for? Okay, I can go look at his record here, and then click the registration button. No, excuse me. Okay, yeah, and he's taking lots and lots of things. As you can see, he's registered for a whole lot of stuff, so maybe that's not a great example. Let's see if we can find somebody else. Registration. Looks like I have a lot of musicians here, but you can see Michelle D. She's taking quite a course load this term. But these are the courses that she is currently registered for. So we'll use that as an example. And her ID is all 5s. Now, I said use registration, so I need to turn on that use registration option. Again, in Sign-In Setup, Activity screen. And there's another checkbox that says only show registered activities in the activity screen. Okay, so let's save that. Okay, so here comes Michelle with her late media. Now she sees a list of classes, but what was a good example? Symphony. Well, she's in taking 4 instruments right now. There she has 2 tutoring classes. She's got 3 items in my classes and 1 in math. But as you can see, it's showing a whole lot less than I had when I wasn't using registration. So she's coming in with for Calc 1, the professor is George Lucas. And which tutors are available to help her? There they are. There's Cindy. Remember, she was a math tutor. And do I want to report visit? No. Okay, so we pretty much ran the gamut of all of the things students can pick when they're walking into the center. Again, that was category, activity, service type, instructor, available tutor, and they're only seeing their registered course. Okay. Now let's talk about another option here. The students are not signing in, you're signing them in. So do you have the capacity to sign them in yourself? Well, absolutely. Anything a student can do, you can do from the back end here as an administrator. But I've got sign-in setup here, or excuse me, student visits tracking, pardon me, and sign in. Okay, so what I can do here is pick a particular category, an activity, a tutor, an instructor, all the same things the students were picking, right? And then I can pick 1 or more students to sign in. Okay, and I can click them, I can find their names or whatever I want to do. So I can do multiple sign-ins here at once. Okay, so let's look at Amundsen, and I'm going to sign him into guitar here, but see it says give a sign-in, sign-out period of an hour. That's the default, but I could turn that off, and he's just signed in and waiting to be signed out. So I can either give them an hour, a round trip as we call it, or I can sign them in and then later sign them out, or have the auto sign-out rules sign them out, right? But I'll give an hour, and I want to show you why. I'll sign in. And now let's go look at who's in. Okay, so I have people from before, right? Michelle and, okay, Aaron and Brooks, I just signed in manually. But I've got quite a number of students signed in here. So let's go look at sign-up. Okay, so these are the currently signed in students. I can take the whole group here and give them either a period that I'd specify or sign them out right now. Okay, so I have total power over when they sign in, when they sign out. Okay, as an administrator. Now, let's talk about, oops, I messed something up. I shouldn't have signed that student out. He really needed another hour, let's say, for Amundsen. Okay, I can clean that up after the fact as an administrator by going to my edit sign-in logs here. Okay, and let's just look at today. I said Amundsen, and you see he had a period of 0.02. Well, let's say that's not right. He really needed an hour and a half. Okay, so I can go pick that record, change my period to 1.5, and now I've credited him with an hour and a half. Okay? So I certainly have the capacity after the fact to do those things. Okay? Now we're going to continue on, but we're going to go a little further again. I'm going to show you two more options with sign-ins for students still. The first one is the intake system. Okay, the intake system, all that does is put them in a list and they wait until they're called. Okay, then they can be signed in either by a lab assistant or someone that's in charge of that intake system, or a tutor can sign the student in from their own station, or an advisor. So that's a nice thing. The student waits. They then go sit down with the advisor. The advisor accesses the intake system and signs the student in with him or her. Okay? Now, let's find where that intake system is. There it is, here. Okay, and it's under waiting options. So one box to turn on the intake system. Now, there is an option here that says when intake system is on, tutors can see and sign in students waiting for other tutors. Okay, that's important because if that box is not checked, then a tutor or advisor would only see the students waiting for them, okay, versus students waiting for other tutors or advisors. So that's up to you if you only want them to see the people waiting for them or you want to see all the students waiting for everyone. Okay? So I'll leave that off. I'll say you can only see yourself. Okay, now what I want to do is I'm going to sign a couple of the tutors in just so I have them in my intake list. And I can do that again manually. So I'm going to put Cindy Bright in, Morgan Freeman in, and how about Tom Cruise? And they're signing in without a sign out. Okay, so now 3 tutors are signed in, and I can see the tutors here. There they are. Okay, and I can even show their photos if I want to. Okay, but remember my intake system is on, and I can tell it's on because it lights this button up here. And now I return to my sign-in screen. And here comes Phil Shore. He's coming in. Remember, I'm using registration. There's a lot smaller list. But Phil Shore is coming in for Calc 1, required hours. And he wants to meet with Cindy Bright. Says you are now in line, please remain in the area until your name is called. Okay. Now you can set up text messaging too, where the student could do that, go into the queue, and then when they're the next in line to be helped, you can automatically send them a text message if you want to. Okay. And I'll sign in another student. And let's say another Calc 1. With Cindy Bright again. And I'm going to sign in one more. And let's do art history, required. This time I'm going to pick Morgan Freeman. Okay, so I have 3 students that are now waiting in line. Okay, now as a student, I can go click the intake system button here because I want to see how many people are in front of me, right? How long I have to wait. So when I click that box, I can see the number of minutes. Let's say I'm Matt here. I can see that Chetan and Phil are ahead of me. They've been waiting a minute, and I haven't been waiting for long. And Matt, if you're on the call, I guess I'm using you from a previous example here. But you can see a student can easily see how long potentially their wait is going to be. Okay, now these buttons to sign the student in are grayed out. But if I use administrator credentials down here, then suddenly those buttons are available to me. Okay, so now as an administrator, and I said lab assistant, but whoever you give that power to, then I can control the students and sign in the students with whomever I want. Now I can see also who's working and who's not. If you're not here, then you're not signed in at work. Here's Tom Cruise. He's not helping anybody. He's free. Cindy is busy with one person. Clint is busy with one, and Morgan is busy with one. Okay. So an administrator, let's say I want to sign Phil Shore in with Cindy Bright. I would simply click Phil Shore. Now, if I pick Cindy Bright, it will just sign the student in. Okay. But what if I want to sign Cindy Bright in with the free Tom Cruise? Right? It doesn't match what the tutor picked, or excuse me, what the student picked. I can do that, and then it'll ask me, do you want to sign in with Cindy or Tom? Okay, so I say no, I want to sign in with Tom, and report to instructor, sure. So now Tom is busy with one. The queue is now removed that student, and Chetan and Matt have been waiting for 2 minutes. Okay? Now I want to sign another student in, just to get more in my queue. Oh, he was already signed in. Signed him out and back in. One sec here. Okay, and let's sign him in with Calc 1 again. And I want to pick Cindy. And looking at the intake system now, I have 2 people waiting for Cindy Bright, and I have 1 waiting for Morgan Freeman. Now let's say that I'm Cindy Bright, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I want to sign these students in from my own station. Okay? I can do that by signing in as a tutor. So you would be in that tutor table and enter that information, and now it pops open my tutor pad because it knows I'm a tutor. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute. But here is what I want to show you, students in line. Okay? So this is the individualized view for just that tutor of who's waiting for it. Now, I only have, I signed in as Morgan Freeman, my mistake. Let's sign in as Cindy Bright. Sorry, I got my 4s and 5s mixed up. But now students in line, and I have 2. Now, when I signed in with Morgan Freeman, I had 1, right? I signed 1 person in with Morgan and 2 in with Cindy. But this is what I want to show you. Here's Cindy Bright. I don't have to enter anything because I've already logged in as a staff member, and now I'm waiting, I'm ready to help Chetan. I merely click Sign Student In, and now Chetan is removed. I'm helping him. I can continue to monitor my students in line. Once I'm done with Chetan, I could sign him out, or he would be auto-signed out, and I can sign in Phil Shore now, or I can remove, where did Phil Shore go? I don't know. Let's get rid of him. Okay, so you control your own intake system by students in line. Okay. All right. Think about the intake system as a long list that students can be called from either by staff members or by tutors. Okay. There's another form of waiting that we can do, though, and that's called the activity waiting list. Okay. Now, the activity waiting list isn't for the overall center. The activity waiting list is for a particular activity. Okay, so I'm going to go look at my activities here. And let's see, we'll pick about OBO. Okay, so when I look at my OBO record, there's one thing in particular I want you to look at, and that's this that says max student. Okay, so this means what are the maximum number of students that are allowed to be in OBO at any one time? Okay, and I'll say 2. Okay, so only 2 people can ever be signed into OBO at the same time. So now let's do a little cleanup here. I want to turn off registration because I don't want to see who's registered for OBO. So let's turn that off. And then I want to sign all my students out just so I have a clean list here. And I'll do that manually. So everybody out now. Okay, but then I have to enable the activity waiting list. Okay, and I do that in my setup here, in my waiting options, sorry. Sign-in setup, waiting options. Okay, let's turn the intake system off, and let's turn the activity waiting list on. Okay. All right. So Phil Shore is signing in a camera up there. Okay, so now Phil Shore is in trombone, right? Here comes the next student. Student 2 signing in for trombone. And we can pick Cameron again, it doesn't matter. Sure. Okay, so that's number 2 now in trombone. Let's do another one in trombone. Okay, and it says, sorry, this activity is full. Would you like to be added to the waiting list? Currently, there is no student waiting for this activity. So remember, I had max 2, so my 2 are in there. Well, let's go ahead and say, sure, I'll wait in the activity waiting list. Okay, now I'm in line in the activity waiting list, not the intake system. And let's do another. So I'm coming in for trombone again. And now there's 1 student waiting for this activity. Do I want to wait? Sure. Okay. Now here, this button is now showing because I turned on activity waiting list, and same sort of concept as intake system, but on a per activity basis, right? So now I go look, and Charles Norris hasn't quite, excuse me, how long has he been waiting? Waiting since 11, or is that 1:50? I'm blind here. But seats available, 0. Right? So what does that mean? Well, it means that somebody has to sign out of trombone before a seat becomes available, and then Charles Norris can go sign in for trombone, or I can sign him into trombone from my waiting list. Okay, so let's go sign Chetan out now. He's done with his trombone. Okay, and now it'll pop open the activity waiting list automatically, and it'll say, well, I got a seat available. Okay. Now I can pick Charles Norris here, and I need an admin ID in order to do it from the front screen here. And then I can sign Charles Norris. Okay, and now Matt Powell is waiting, and no seats are available. So the process continues. Another student signs out, it frees the seat, then Matt can sign. Okay? So that's how the activity waiting list works. Okay, moving on. And I'm going a little long. I'll try to speed things up a bit. And I am recording this one, so if you want to go back and review it. Back in as admin. All right, and let's go clean up what I've got there. So I want to go turn off activity waiting list. Set it back to the way it was. Okay, and the next thing I'm going to talk about now is preventing students from signing in when they're supposed to be in class. Okay, and in visits tracking setup, I have an option down here that says, do not allow students to sign in during their class time. Okay, now what that's going to do, I've got a merge field that shows the class they're supposed to be in. I haven't set anything up yet, I'm just turning it on, but we're kind of putting the cart ahead of the horse, but that's all right. So I'm saying do not allow students to sign in during class time. Well, how does AccuTrack know what class time is? There's 2 things that would enable that. One is the student has to be registered for the class, and 2, the class schedule indicates that the class is currently in session. Okay, so let's go talk about those 2 items. First, categories and activity, and I'm going to pick Symphony. And let's see, I had one set up in advance here. guitar. And again, this is importable. When you import your classes, you can import the schedules for those classes. But I can do it manually in here by Activity Schedules. I'm just clicking this button. And it tells me that Wednesday from 1 to 2:10 and Thursday from 1 to 2:10, my guitar class is taking place. Okay, so that's when my class is, but let's see which students are registered for guitar. And I have this group, including David Arley. Okay, so I've got all these people that are in my guitar class. So I've enabled do not sign in during class period. Let's go try to sign in with one of those IDs and pick guitar. Actually, we won't be able to pick anything. You are not allowed to sign in during class time. Guitar Symphony, you need to hurry and get to Guitar Symphony. So you can make this message say whatever you want, but you get the idea. So here comes another student. And he's in guitar. Hopefully I find somebody that's not in guitar. And I get a survey for her. But this is what I want to show you. She can sign in, right, because she's not in the guitar class that's happening right now. So she has the capacity to sign in, whereas all those other students I just tried are all registered for my guitar class and they can. All right. Now there's something I want to mention. I'm kind of changing topics on you here, but this one's kind of important because I've had more than one person ask me about this, and I'm talking about appointment sign-ins. Okay? Now remember, an appointment is when a student says that they want to meet with somebody in the center next week or whenever it may be. It's not a walk-in happening right now. It's something happening in the future. Okay? But there's one setting that seems to confuse people about appointment sign-ins. And it's this one box right here. It says bypass activity and tutor selection screens for appointment sign-ins. Okay, so what that means, if that box is checked, that when a student has scheduled an appointment for, say, 2 o'clock today, and in this case I'm saying he can be here at 1:40 or he can be here at 2:20, and it still counts as an appointment sign-in, that I don't want him to have to pick a thing. Okay, so it's just going to sign that student in and not make them pick anything, because it's going to use the category and activity and tutor from the scheduled appointment for the sign-in. Okay, so I've had people say, well, I get confused. The students are getting confused because they're signing in and some of them are picking things and some of them aren't picking things. Well, the ones picking things are the ones walking in the center. The ones that aren't picking things in this case are signing in for appointments. Okay, so that's what that box does. Okay, now I can turn that off and make them pick something if I want to. But if I want to make it a streamlined process for appointment sign-ins, I can just check that box. Okay. Okay, and I know I'm running a little long. I'll try to speed through the process here, or maybe do a second webinar. But I'm going to talk about tutor sign-in. Okay, and we already saw that once. But when you enter a tutor ID in the system, remember that's added in the tutor table, then automatically this tutor pad is going to open. Okay, the tutor pad is for that specific tutor, and then they can do things from the tutor pad, such as get to their back-end screens that I'm going to mention briefly, enter session notes, so if they want to see their sessions for students that have signed in to see them, they can do so. They can view their appointments, so this is weekly, monthly, daily viewers. They can run reports for themselves. They can sign a whole class of students in. They can, and I'm logged in now, so let's log out and do it again. Now they can log in as a staff member, so I'm logging them in coming into work, or they can log in as a student if they're coming in to get help, if they're a student and a tutor. They can change their schedule. So remember I said a tutor had to have a schedule and activity assignments to show up, but you can enable the tutor to change their own schedule. Okay? And these buttons you can turn on or off as you see fit. But just know that the tutor can do all of these items through the tutor pad when they first sign into the system, including signing into work. Okay? Now I'm going to do this tutor sign-in one more time. And I want to look at my reports first of all. Now I only have 2 reports in here. Okay? And how do I determine which reports those are? Okay, I'm going to show you that on the back end because we're going to look at the tutor access group briefly. The other thing I want to show you here is what is this admin button and what does that do? Okay, so I'll show you exactly that. Okay, and I'm going to go to System Access, and we're talking about tutors, remember, tutor pad, and when I say tutors, I mean everybody that's in this list. So all of these tutors will get the exact same rules that I'm about to set up. Okay, I go to System Access, and then System Access Group. Okay, and I have an access group here called Tutor. Okay, and I'm going to edit this. But what I'm seeing is a representation of every menu in AccuTrack. Okay, so I can determine what tutors can get to or not get to from AccuTrack itself. So I'm saying they can do, let's say, registration, but they can't do categories, activities, or service types. Now I have visit tracking. So these are the things that tutors can do or not do. Okay, let's save this. And I'm going to sign in as a tutor now. And I'm going to pick admin. Admin is the back-end screens, but let's look and see what I've got. Well, I don't have anything I can click on there. I have just registration. Remember, that's the only thing I turned on. I have those available. So I can determine what tutors can do and not do when they sign in as admin. Okay? Go back in as root. And by the way, that includes the setup screens, where I keep clicking setup. You can not let them get to that. You can disable them from getting to any of the menus over here on the right. So it's totally up to you how you control what the tutors can see and not see when they click that admin button from the tutor pad. Okay. Now I talked about what reports they can see. Okay, just like admin here for these screens, I can do the same things for the reports they can run. Okay, so here's my tutor. Well, and my tutors only have those two reports, right, that I'd shown you from before. So let's go ahead and give them these tutor reports. And let's give them some student group reports. Okay, so I save that. Return to my sign-in screen. Sign in as a tutor. And I'm going to click the reports button. So these are the reports that I just enabled the tutor group to have access to. Okay? So that's how you can control tutor admin access to the back-end screens and which reports you want tutors to be able to run. Now the other thing you'll see here is if I go click on tutor roster, I don't know what's a good one here, activity assignments. Well, I've got this checkbox over here that says tutors, but I cannot uncheck that. So it's only for the currently signed in tutors. Okay, I can't run reports to see the pay rates of all my other tutors, for example, because I can't uncheck that. It's only going to be me, okay? Me as the currently signed in tutor. Okay, and the last topic I'm going to cover here, just due to time constraints, is I get the question quite a bit that people ask me, well, how do instructors sign into AccuTrack? Well, the answer is by default they don't. The only people that sign in are students, tutors, and administrators. Now, I just showed you the answer, though, by going through those access groups for tutors. Okay? So I can create an access group for my instructors, my professors, determine exactly what they can get to or not get to, even which reports they can get or not get to. Okay? And I'm going to do that for you real quick. System access groups. And I've got a professor group right here. So what do you know? Okay, and I can just create whatever I want. I can create as many different access groups as I want. But this is professors. I go edit. Well, what can a professor do? Oh, let's say they can run some reports, and they can see stuff about tutors, let's say. Tutor. And I'll just give them that. Okay, so now I have this professor group out there, but how do I determine, or how do I put professors in my professor group? So you do that through system administrators right here. And I'm going to click add. Like to type. All right, and I'll put an ID. And a password. Now here's where I determine which access group Joe Professor is a member of, right here. So Joe Professor is part of my professor's access group. And part of my professor group. Okay, and same thing for reports access. So my professors can only see, what do I have? Student, list, visited, and student groups. That's fine. So I'll just keep it like that. I got something with session log. I've got quite a few there. That's fine, no? Okay, so let's go sign in. As my newly created professor, and you can see I said tutors and tutor groups, so I enabled professors to be able to do that, but they can't do a whole lot of other things because I turned off all those other things. So you can open up the system to your professors and give them exactly what you want. And there we go. So I have just these items. Okay, so the reason I did it before, remember I clicked reports. I don't know if you guys noticed that. I was kind of confusing myself, but I click reports down here. And if I don't have any reports that match the criteria, it's not going to show up, I believe, here. I'll have to check that. But I can click reports here, and it shows all of the ones that my professors are allowed to run. So I hope I didn't confuse anyone with me jumping around here. But I think you get the concept. You create the access group, call it whatever you want, determine what access options they can get to, what reports they can get to, then you assign those people to that particular access group. Okay? Now, I didn't really touch a whole lot on the tutor pad, so I'll have a follow-up webinar where I discuss in detail exactly what those tutor pad options are. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all very much. And again, I did record this, so I'll make it available out on our YouTube channel. And thanks a lot for attending. Appreciate it. Okay. Bye, everybody.